Marquette Devon Burton. And today we're talking about the pimping, because one of my subscribers, Otter Strikes Back, sent me a donation and said, Marquette, that first book review you did on Pimp, Story of My Life by Iceberg Slim, excellent, but it was too short. We need you to dig into that game deeper, break it down piece by piece. I actually went and repurchased the book. I originally had the one that's all silver with the pink pimp in the middle, but I got this new edition. And when I was thinking about it, I said, let me go through and let's be thorough. I'm going to go word by word, page by page, and break the game all the way down. You see, because Iceberg put some classic game in this text. So first question, the book's called Pimp. So what is a pimp? Is a pimp born or is a pimp created? What is a pimp? What is a pimp not? So those are the critical questions I want to start with. And as I always say, the pimping applies not only to putting a hoe on the blade and making her grind for your pay, it also applies to the square world, your relationships with your girlfriend, your relationship with a woman you want to make your girlfriend, your business dealings. Whatever you want to do, I can assure you the pimping is going to be involved and it's going to be something that you can leverage. So the first thing we want to start with, what is a pimp? Well, the classic definition of a pimp earns their money out of a bitch's ass. That's what a pimp is, historically speaking, right? In the foreword of Iceberg Slim's Pimp, Story of My Life, he writes of a story where he's in his car, as he calls it, the hog, and he's in there with three of his whores. And he says he can smell a vile stench, and he was in a very devilish mood. And he's like, have one of you whores shit on herself or something? And he cracks the window. And then one of his whores, Rachel, in a deferential tone, says, well, daddy, baby, you know, we've been working at these truck stops and, you know, we've been getting in those tricks cars and we haven't been going to the bathroom in between because we've been working and humping so hard for you to get your money. Those are our whore asses you're smelling. And then he says, I grinned widely inside, meaning he smiled inside his head. And then he says that the other whores laughed and giggled at Rachel's witty comment. And he says a pimp likes when his whores giggle because he knows that they're asleep. So the important thing there is that the pimpin' keeps a steel lid on his emotions. That's a direct quotation from Iceberg. He says a pimp keeps a steel lid on his emotions. He says that a pimp has a rich inner life, because a pimp is constantly plotting and scheming to outsmart his whores. Meaning that while they're laughing, you're thinking. You're constantly thinking. It's not how intelligent you are, it's how often you are intelligent. Meaning we might all be smart, but how often are you using your brain? And I noticed that that's one thing that Iceberg points out constantly, is that not only do you have to keep a lid on your emotions, you also have to be constantly thinking. This is chess, not checkers. Well, I guess for the pimp, it's chess. For a bitch, it's definitely checkers. You'll hear a lot of people in the game say that a pimp is born. You might hear them say things like, man, that brother don't have a pimp bone in his body, which is to say that there's a DNA to the pimping. There's a pimp gene, and you might not have it. The truth is that there is something born into the pimping. Pimps are dominant. Now think about how dominant you have to be to look a woman in her face and tell her, I need 100% of your money, not 30%. I need 100% of your money, 100% of the time. A critical trait that I believe is born into the pimp is taste. You cannot teach taste. I know, I've tried. Taste is something that pimps are known for. And that's why you might see a pimp with the hair slicked back. You might see a pimp dripping in gold. You might see a pimp wearing a cape or wearing a cloak. Taste is what allows the pimp to be the peacock. Taste is what allows the pimp to be the center of attention. Taste is what allows a pimp to be surrounded by a bitch and a motherfucker walk by and they look at the pimp, not the bitch, because the pimpin' is gorgeous. You can learn it a little bit. You can take a look at the pimpin' and say, okay, I like the way he's doing that. Okay, I like how he put those colors together. Let me adopt that. You can learn a little bit. And another thing that you'll notice throughout the book, when Iceberg describes how people perceive him, it kind of amounts to him being a striking figure. Not only is he tall and handsome, but he's striking. A pimp is striking. It's not only because they have the taste and they're draped in the finest fabrics, it's also because they're striking. And what I mean by striking is, for example, when you walk into a room, people turn and they look at you. You become the center. And it's not necessarily because you're wearing a big ass floppy hat or a crazy suit or a fur or a mink. It's because you have a presence. You have a strength about you. You stand on something. You're about your values. You know what you are. You're authentic and you won't compromise for anything. And when you walk in with your shoulders back, your chest out, and your chin up like you're George Jefferson. I was a moderator for an event. White woman comes up to me, older lady, and she says, "You are a very striking man." And then I knew that's the key. It's not about being handsome because, you'll see a lot of pimps that aren't pretty. Another critical trait of the pimp is to be charming, meaning that you can dazzle somebody's bitch right from under their arms. To be charming is really the pimp's chief tool. That means that you can walk into the room and by the time you walk out of the room, everyone knows who you are. And if they didn't get to find out who you are, they want to know who you are. And they think, wow, gee, he's a really cool cat. And that leads me into the next piece, cool. Cool is extremely important, and cool can be both born into you and it can both also be taught. Pimps are known for their cool. After all, the man is called Iceberg Slim. Iceberg because he's cool. In the book, it talks about a situation where a gun was shot and a bullet went straight through the man's hat and he just sat there as cool as ice. No reaction. And being cool is something that people respect because it shows presence of mind. It's like a general being calm in times of war when everyone's panicking. It shows that you have something that the average square does not have. You have something that a bitch does not have, but a bitch definitely needs. So everybody likes someone that's cool because it shows that you're in control. It shows that you're calm and it shows that you're ready to take care of business. It's something that people admire. Being cool is absolutely critical for a pimp. But we know that a pimp is not only born, a pimp is also raised, meaning that you can learn the pimping. Now, how do I know that? You see, you know that you can learn the pimping, one, because the pimping's written down right here. But not everybody can execute the pimping. You can learn the pimping, but that doesn't mean you can execute the pimping. It takes a special man to do that. But what I can tell you is there's something called game, and we've all heard of game, and game means knowledge. And game is generally passed on from somebody who's done it to somebody who wants to do it. You'll see people look at this video and they'll say, "You're not a pimp. You don't have a floppy hat, a cane, or a limp." A pimp is somebody who's earned a pimp dollar. And another thing to know about the pimping, which I didn't mention, and this is something that is not born into you, it's something that you learn through the game. The pimping, we don't sweat the small things. That's because we're cool, right? That means that when somebody comes on my channel and they hate or they say something negative, I don't even respond. I just remove the comment because there's no profit. Number one, the pimping is not insecure. What you'll find in Iceberg Slim's work and in reality, if you've dealt with bitches to any degree, is that they are all insecure, meaning they are constantly dealing with high levels of uncertainty. Who am I? Am I valuable? Am I worthwhile? Do people care about me? What do they think about me? The pimpin' could not care less what you think about them. The pimpin' only cares about what pays. So a pimp is not insecure. A pimp is supremely confident. A pimp is known for their emotional intelligence. A pimp has high IQ, but it's not the IQ that gets the job done. It's the emotional intelligence. It's the ability to think every time before you speak. To get so conditioned of thinking before speaking that at a certain point, everything you say goes through a filter. You understand me? Because a pimp does not share his true thoughts with everyone and damn sure doesn't share them with a bitch. You understand? Because as the King Pimp Iceberg Slim says here, quote, "A pimp is the loneliest bastard on earth. He's got to know his whores. He can't let them know him." And if you have ever been involved in this game at any level, that is bone chilling because a pimp is extremely lonely. Like a god, there's only one God by himself. Doesn't have other guys to share his thoughts and emotions with. You keep them inside. You're supposed to be able to manage your emotions as a man. And that, my friends, is not something you're born with. That's something you have to groom and condition over time. You have to be able to deal with your emotions as a man. Keep them controlled and leverage them to their best effect. How are you going to be cool when a bitch sees you sweating? How are you going to be cool when a bitch knows how to get under your skin? The pimping is cool, calm, and collected all the time. And if he chooses to appear angry, he might not even be angry when he performs that behavior. You understand? It's a performance. So though the pimp is extremely authentic, the pimp is a consummate actor. And the pimp indeed is extremely lonely because you are the only one that knows your true thoughts and true emotions, which you never share with anyone. Definitely not a bitch. You might talk through with a pimp and like, hey man, I got this situation. Let me run it down to you. Tell me what you think. You ever been in this situation? What would you do? But you would never have that same conversation with a bitch. Here's another thing. He's got to know his whores. They can't know him. Because a pimp has to be proactive to keep a hoe active. So you need to know everything about her because you can't really play a bitch unless you know the bitch. You have to Dr. Phil the hoe. Don't feel the hoe. Don't put your hands on her because the sex is something that comes last if ever. But you need to fuck her mind. Don't fuck her body, fuck her mind. Make sure you understand everything that's in there and you know how to romance her mind and put her in whatever mindset you need her to be in to get the job done. But the key, Iceberg Slim, King Pimp, says that she can't know you. What does that mean? Well, that's actually not quite accurate if you take it out of context. She must know some things about you, right? She must know what your goals are. She must know what you want of her. She must know what your rules and regulations are. She must know what your consequences are. She must have a vision of you that is extraordinary. Because if she doesn't know you at all, how can she grow to love you? You must teach her how to love you. You must teach her who you are. But interestingly, it's almost like social media. You are teaching her exactly what you want her to know of you. She will not truly know you. She will not truly know what all of your life experiences have been. She shouldn't know what causes you pain or problems. She shouldn't know what bothers you. She should know what not to do to bother you, but she should not know what deeply irks you. She should not know any of your pains. You understand? So she should only know the veneer of you. She should know the glossy, shiny part of the pimping. She should know that the pimp looks good and she's the one that needs to grind for the pay to make sure that a pimp can stay that way. The relationship between a pimp and a bitch is based on love, fantasy, and riches. You need to teach her how to love you deeply because a woman is controlled by emotions. And love is the strongest emotion you can leverage to control that woman's mind. So you teach her to love you. Then you sell her a dream, a fantasy of riches. And then you inspire her to get after it. And to get after it every day. And to get after it with her whole being, no matter what sacrifice it takes on her part. Because she loves you. And you love the fucking riches. You don't love her. You love her in as much as she can bring back the money. And that's another thing that the King Pimp teaches you. You're just as sweet as the scratch is. If she brings you back a lot of scratch, you tend to like her more. This is an important thing that I need to clear up on what a pimp is not. Because you guys have been listening to too much rap music. And these suckers were never pimps. They might use the term pimp, but they don't understand the ism. When you're talking about tricking on a bitch, that is antithetical to the pimping. The pimping don't go to a bar and buy a bitch a drink. The pimping goes to a bar and a bitch buys the pimp a drink. Pimps don't buy bitches drinks. Because as soon as you get into a relationship with a woman and you are putting money into her causelessly, then you are creating the wrong dynamic. You need to pimp on her from the get-go. Now that doesn't mean when you shake her hand, hi bitch, I'm the pimpin', I'm gonna need you out on the blade tomorrow, right after you introduce yourself. That means that when you introduce yourself and she says, hey, can you get me a drink? You say, how about you get me a drink? You need to establish the dynamic straight away. Because the way you start with a bitch is the way you end with a bitch. You see, the pimping is about authenticity. How the fuck you gonna meet her and you're square and then all of a sudden you start trying to pimp on the bitch? That doesn't make any sense. Not to me, not to a bitch, and it shouldn't make any sense to you. So you listen to these rappers talking about, oh, I paid Shorty's rent and I did X, Y, and Z from her. Bitch don't respect that. In fact, in the square world, a bitch will let you pay her rent and go fuck Johnny and come back and bring that stank box back to you. You see, the depth of the pimping is so profound that you have such a deep relationship with the female that she gives you unadulterated truth. You've reached such a new level that maybe she's never been on, where she could tell the whole truth. You tell her straight away, I know that you're a bitch. So you don't even need to waste your time lying to me, pretending you didn't go fuck Johnny or Bob and Joseph. Just make sure that when you see Bob, Johnny, and Joseph, you bring back my goddamn money. You just make sure of that. You don't need to hide that from me because I'll be proud of you, especially if you come back with Benjamin, Jackson, and Grant. How about that? Also, in the foreword, Iceberg writes, quote, a pimp is his own best company, meaning you're in the company of yourself. You're enjoying solitude. And the reason that Iceberg writes a pimp is his own best company is because, as he writes later in the book, a pimp is the loneliest bastard on earth. And that is because you cannot share your emotions and your true thoughts with your whores because you have to manage her thoughts. You don't need her managing your thoughts. So, indeed, a pimp's inner world must be rich, and a pimp, by nature of the job, is indeed lonely. Now, one thing I want to tell you, and this might not make a lot of sense to you, but a pimp is spiritual. A pimp is spiritual. And you'll see a lot of pimps, like even the Bishop Magic Don Juan, who I'm a big fan of, because when you see the Genuine article, it's very obvious. And when you listen to the pimp, you can tell like, oh, he's really been in the game. So pimping is spiritual because just like a religious figure, your women should be slavishly dedicated to you. So it's definitely spiritual, and that you need to come to them with a religious message that requires all of their dedication. It requires that maybe they do sacrifice themselves like Jesus. The pimping gets biblical. And if you don't understand that the pimping has a spiritual component to where you are the God of her religion, you're really not suited for the pimping. Whatever you need, they need. When they speak only of we. When you speak only of we, but you really mean me, because you're number one. And they need to know that, and you need to know that. And the pimping is honest and authentic. That's why a pimp can look into a bitch and tell her, you're a bitch. And that's not an insult, that's a job description. A really important aspect of the pimping that people forget is a pimp is a motivator. Because you got to be able to get a bitch up on her feet and out on that blade every single day. You understand? And you have to be able to do that while having her go out there and take penitentiary chances, have her out there risking her life while you're sitting back and filing your fingernails. You have to be a hell of a motivator. So you have to be extremely optimistic, able to paint a beautiful future and say, hey, baby, you see, I already have everything I've ever wanted. You know, I got the convertible drop. I have these fine clothes and I have a lovely place to lay my head, but there are even greater things out there for you and I want to get all of it. And we're going to need you to do X, Y, and Z for us to get there, because I know that, like me, you have great dreams. I know you want to live in a big house. I know you want to take care of your family. So let's make that happen. And for us to do that, I'm going to need you to get your ass up right motherfucking now and get out there and start earning. And I'm going to need you to bring back some money that I cannot fold, because that's the only way we can get to it, baby. Okay? You understand? So you need to be able to motivate her. And let her know, make her feel good that she's the most gorgeous woman. Let her know that even though she's out there selling pussy, when she comes back to you, you value her just the same way you did before she left. A pimp is not loquacious, meaning that a pimp is not talkative, always running their mouth. In fact, a pimp is often taciturn, quiet, silent, observing. Pimp might smile at you, a pimp might chuckle. You understand me? So when you hear these internet pimps, you often hear them, you know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm saying? I had a bitch over there, man. You know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about? I had a bitch on there. You know what I'm talking about? That's not the pimping, because you'll find that when you talk too much, your words don't have value. And a pimp, you pimp through the mouthpiece. You don't pimp through the hand. You pimp through the mouthpiece. And if you talk too much and the mouthpiece has no power, you don't have any pimping. There are types of pimps. Importantly, you'll see Iceberg says, I hated women at a point in the pimping. But if you listen to Magic Don Juan, he says, of course I love my women. They were my means of survival. They brought me back money. And, I had a bitch that got shot, and I went to the hospital and stayed with her family. And if my bitches got locked up, I had to go get them. I love my bitches. And you know what? Those are two sides of the coin. I'd rather be on the side of loving a bitch that brings me back money. Now, a fall down bitch, a broke bitch, a bitch that ain't bringing back no money, that's not my kind of bitch. So, the important thing to understand is that a pimp is not there to force a woman to do anything, to beat a woman. You got to pimp from the mouthpiece, because at the end of the day, you can't force anyone to do anything. In fact, when a pimp does have to whoop a trick or whoop a bitch, it's out of necessity. And the reason that I say a pimp should be laconic, or I say a pimp should be taciturn and not always speaking, is because the more you speak, the more obligations you create for yourself. Because as a pimp, you're authentic, you're a person of your word. So if you say you're going to do something, you have to do it. And what you'll learn, and as you'll hear from Bishop Magic Don Juan, he said, if I told a bitch that I will kill her for doing X, Y, and Z, and if she does X, Y, and Z, I need to whoop her motherfucking ass so badly that in her head, she is convinced I'm going to kill her. And she says, Daddy, please don't kill me. And when I believe that she believes that I was going to do what I said I was going to do, only then will I stop. So what I say is, don't make proclamations and announcements, because you have to live up to them. Make it as few as possible. But if you do say you're going to do something, you better do it, because no one likes fakery, and especially a hoe, because a hoe is a street bitch. And she's also seen a lot of bad situations. If you tell her you're going to protect her, she needs to be able to rely on that, or else you're going to end up getting knocked for your bitch by somebody who does have a word of gold. So it's extremely important that you are a person of your word. Now, one thing that the King Pimp doesn't review in the book that I do want to add is, if you see me wearing an ascot, or you see me wearing my cloak, or you see me with a fedora with a couple feathers in it, those are the tools of the pimping. Understand, I do these things to leverage them for profitable ends. I don't ever get confused and consumed with ego that I actually want attention for the sake of attention. That's the difference between a bitch and a pimp. A bitch actually wants attention because she has low self-esteem. She wants attention because she lacks self-esteem. She uses outer show as a substitute for a lack of inner worth. I think that's Aesop right there. But anyways, point is, the pimpin' doesn't wear finery to make up for a lack of esteem for himself. Further, the pimpin' doesn't want attention for the sake of attention. The pimpin' wants profit. And I say that because you may have seen on the internet a cat named Pimp Snooki. And pimpin' don't backbite. We don't talk dirty about men when they're not present. So I'm not going to backbite the brother. I am going to say he was pimping on prime time. That's what you don't do. You don't go on television and say, I am a pimp. That's what you don't do, because there's something called pimping and pandering. And I do believe that's a criminal charge that carries very significant time in prison. Especially if you're pimping children, which is not pimping. That's child abuse, and that's disgusting. And we spit on you. So what I do want to be clear is, don't get into the pimping. Pimping ain't easy. And I really do mean pimping ain't easy. Pimps don't just say that as a phrase because it sounds cool. They say that because if you really are pimping, you are spending 24/7 with a bitch. And the thing about a bitch is that a bitch by nature is dysfunctional. After all, if you have a bitch that's attractive and she can't find a square that's going to pay for her to live, she must be really dumb or hard to deal with. If a bitch has intelligence or common sense, why can't she find a job that'll pay her decently? You see, so the type of bitch that a pimp deals with, he's offering a real value to. Stability, support, guidance, peace, management. You see, because the kind of bitch that pimps are generally dealing with, they're very dysfunctional, and you have to deal with them 24/7. That's why they do call it a family. You do live together with them. You do have to manage them, their emotions and their affairs. So pimping ain't easy. But what I am saying is use these practical tips to implement in your square life so that you can thrive there.